I'm going to tell you today about the saga of my experience trying to do online discussion boards in the age of chatbots. It's got all the makings of a great story. It's got love, hate, and eventual reconciliation. So we'll start out with love. I love online discussion boards. I have Reddits that I actively participate in, online Discord groups. SMU has a great online discussion group, Coalition of the Willing, for people who are interested in talking about using AI in their teaching and research. So that's a great discussion board to get involved with if you aren't already. And I'm going to run through some of the things that I like about online discussion boards. So one thing is that it's often really fast. If you have a burning question, you can post on an active online discussion board and get responses right away. And those responses are often quite accurate. And if the first response you get isn't accurate, then other people will pile in and correct the mistakes of the first responses you get. So it's often much faster at getting responses than other routes that you might have tried to get responses to good questions. There's lots of opportunities for persistent engagement, where if you have follow-up questions, you can ask the follow-up questions, and that's usually welcome and encouraged and responded well to on discussion boards. It's often very comfortable, laid-back sort of environment. It doesn't have the same sorts of social anxieties you'd hope that lots of sort of academic writing has for students. So it can often be a fun way of doing things, and also it's often quite social, where you get to know some of the other people on the discussion boards, and you get to know their personalities and have fun interacting with your friends on the discussion boards. Thinking, I guess, more from a teacher's perspective, working with online discussion boards helps to develop some sorts of proficiency with technologies, learning to talk with one another online, and to use these tools that are similar to tools like Microsoft Teams that many folks will end up using in their workplaces as well. So there are lots of great things that we can get from online discussion boards. And for those reasons, I, for years, have used online discussion assignments for students in my classes. I teach philosophy, and so I often just like seeing my students try to connect together the ideas we've been talking about in our classes with things in their daily lives, and getting the chance to work through some of the ideas with other students on the discussion boards. It's often a great addition to my classes, or at least used to be a great addition to my classes, but now we'll get to the hate part of the talk. I hate how online discussion boards have turned out recently. The two main things I blame for it are the pandemic, I think, has changed how social students are with one another, and then chatbots have totally corrupted these assignments. So I've set this up as kind of a scorecard, and I'm going to go ahead and give myself grades on how my online discussion board assignments have become since the pandemic. So first off, for speed, my students do not actively engage in the discussion boards. Often, if you ask a question on the discussion board, you'll just get crickets in response. It's not the right place to go if you have a burning question that you want an answer to. So I'll give myself a D, or give my assignment a D, in terms of how quickly students are getting answers to questions that they have. Often, they just don't respond to one another at all. They don't answer one another's questions. For accuracy, I'll give it a sort of complicated grade. I'll say C first off. When the students do occasionally answer one another's questions, they often give not very good answers to each other, so that's the C quality grade. The ... A is I always go onto the discussion board at the deadline. I don't want to cut off discussion by answering the questions prematurely, so I wait till the deadline and then I answer their questions, and I grade my response as A. So they do get A quality responses eventually, but it's not very quickly. Persistence, I'm going to go ahead and everything I pop up in a quote bubble like this is feedback from students. I'll be telling you eventually about the alternative sort of assignment that I used in a technology, society, and value class. And all the feedback in the speech bubbles is from students in that class. And so regarding persistence, as one of my students said, well, I might hesitate to post multiple times or ask follow-up questions. They don't want to seem like they're dominating the conversation or like they're struggling. So for persistence, in practice, it's extremely occasional these days that I get a student that posts more than once in a discussion board. They basically read what my assignment was, how much do they need to post, and they post just that much once, wash their hands, and are done with it. There is no persistent engagement, which with grade inflation is a D. For comfort, I had been thinking of the discussion boards as a sort of laid-back environment where they didn't have sort of really high stakes. It was basically completionist grading on my part. And so I thought this would be something that they'd be pretty comfortable with. It turns out this is one of the things I was most surprised by in the feedback that I got is they aren't comfortable with it. It's a really high anxiety sort of thing to post in front of other students and show off your potential misunderstandings in front of other students. So in lots of ways, I think they're actually more comfortable just having me read things than having all their classmates read what they've written also. Here's some more quotes. Discussion boards can feel performative. You're often writing with the awareness that your classmates and professors will be reading and possibly judging what you say. There's pressure to write in a polished, formal way. Social anxiety, someone might call me out for being wrong or superficial. So there are lots of sorts of social anxieties that people feel around discussion boards that I had not been aware of, or at least I was surprised to about the degree to which they felt discomfort with the online discussion board assignments. And that's one motivation that people have had. I think when the stakes are higher, that there's going to be social embarrassment in addition to a grade that's on the line. That gives, I think our students have plenty of motivation anyway to go to Chatbots to do their homework for them, but especially when it's an online discussion board assignment, there's especially much motivation for them to go consult the chatbot and have the chatbot write their post for them, so they'll end up being less embarrassed. So I end up having some students have chatbots giving their postings for them, and then once some students are doing that, that kind of ups the standards for everybody else, and so everybody else now feels more pressure to use chatbots themselves. And so in one of my classes, I did have an alternative assignment set up for last semester, and so I had them still doing online discussion assignments. By my estimation, 90% of the postings on there were AI generated, and only 10% were actually human generated. So basically, my discussion boards have devolved into chatbots talking with chatbots. So I would give a D for how much social anxiety and discomfort that they're feeling, and how much pressure they're feeling to turn to chatbots instead of writing their own posts. For sociality, in principle, they could be interacting with each other, but as it turns out, they hardly ever respond to each other's posts, and they hardly ever come back and have the persisting ongoing interactions. So I would grade this as a C-. There's a little bit of interaction with other humans on it, but not very much. And then for developing proficiency, they definitely are not developing good skills that will help them in the workplace to have productive conversations with other workers. Maybe they're learning a little bit about how to get a chatbot to write something for them, except they aren't doing very well at it. Most of their posts are pretty lousy, and so they aren't developing good proficiencies at using chatbots to get their work done for them even. So I would give this a low grade as well. So overall, this is a pretty lousy report card, and in some ways I feel vulnerable standing up in front of you all and saying, this is how I would grade my own assignments for the class. You might rightly think that the problem here is me, that I'm not giving the right sort of assignments to my students, not giving them the right sort of guidance, not setting up the right incentive system to make this be a better learning experience. So if you guys have better ways of doing online discussion board assignments, I would love to learn from you how to do it better, because there are lots of things I really do love about online discussion. But I suspect that the problem here might not just be me. This is how one of my students put it sort of bluntly. They said, online discussion boards suck and no one really cares about them. I think that might be right. So if we sort of focus on what's going on in these discussion boards, at least the way it's played out in my classes is it's heavily involving chatbots. It's basically chatbots talking with chatbots with the humans in the background here. And so that made me start thinking, well, the ship's kind of sailing as far as this being an exercise where they are interacting with chatbots. There's no good way to avoid that chatbots are going to be involved in this, and any humans that are being involved in the discussion boards, they are seeing chatbot postings here. And ultimately, these are pretty lousy chatbot postings because they're just taking whatever off-the-shelf technology they have available and not knowing very well what sort of prompts to give it. And the chatbot isn't very well tuned to give good postings. And so you end up having lousy chatbot posts back and forth as the primary sort of interaction that we're having on these discussion boards. And so that made me think, well, maybe there's a way, if chatbots are going to be involved anyway, maybe at least I can make it be a good chatbot that they're talking with instead of a bad chatbot. Here's the alternative sort of proposal that I ended up going with is instead of assigning them to talk with other students or allegedly other students on a discussion board, instead I would assign them to sit down for an hour and have a discussion with a chatbot that I had created. One big advantage here is the students are actually involved, that they are actually crafting their own postings to send to the chatbot. And they get to have a persistent ongoing conversation for an hour rather than just crafting their one little posting and firing it off to the discussion board. They get back and forth conversation with the chatbot. And then the other big difference here is that the chatbot is not just some off-the-shelf one that knows nothing about my class in particular. Instead, it's one that I have carefully tuned to know about our course, to give responses that are relevant to our course, and that I've done quite a bit of fine-tuning with to help make sure that it's not giving them inaccurate responses or using entirely different language from the language that I use in my courses. So overall, it's a much better chatbot than the off-the-shelf ones that they were using before. Here, down at the bottom of the screen, you can see this is the address for the chatbot. You are welcome to go check it out. I've given my blessing to be on your device while I'm talking. I'm one of those professors who doesn't mind that sort of thing. Here's an example of the chatbot that I created. I don't have time in this short talk to tell you how to create a chatbot like this, but one of the sessions that I'll be doing as a teaching affiliate this semester is walking through the details of how to create a chatbot like this. So if you're interested, do come to that session. My aim was to get these sorts of benefits by replacing the online discussion board allegedly with other humans assignments with an online discussion with a chatbot that I had created instead. So let's go back to our report card and I'll talk through how this went when I had my students do this sort of assignment. So we'll start with speed. Students talked about getting instant feedback, help them stay engaged in the moment instead of having to wait for a long time like they do for discussion boards. I give speed of these chatbots A+. They give you a response within about a minute usually, and that's way faster than I usually answer student emails. I don't think you could reasonably hope for faster speed in responses to questions than they're getting from these chatbots. Accuracy can be a problem. It's been improving over recent years, but I would still give accuracy a somewhat low grade. So the students, I think they aren't great at assessing how accurate the answers are, but they thought the chatbot was more accessible and knowledgeable than most student discussion boards, gave clear, accurate explanations right away, stayed focused on the actual topic. I give the accuracy the chatbots at this stage roughly a B+ for this class. I've tried it for another class where I would give a B- on its accuracy for Python coding advice for my Minds, Brains, and Robotics class. But just talking about the ethics of technology sorts of issues, it's a B+. So it's not quite the A quality responses I give them. It's better than the C quality responses they usually get from other students. And so I kind of have a low bar. I'm trying to get a better learning experience for them than talking with other students on the discussion board is. If the chatbot's giving them at least that quality of discussion, and even a bit better, then I am improving their learning experience by having it be a slightly more knowledgeable chatbot that they're talking with rather than less knowledgeable students. Regarding persistence, students say I can ask as many questions as I want, rephrase things if I'm confused, not worry about bothering people or sounding dumb. Oops. I'm able to ask as many questions as I have, don't have to worry about being judged or nervous about things. And if I don't know how to ask the question, that's okay, I can figure it out with chatbot. So I give this an A+. That part of the assignment is having a back and forth discussion with the chatbot. So it gets way more persistent back and forth conversation than they were having on the discussion. Comfort, I mentioned before, this is a big one that surprised me, how uncomfortable they were with the discussion boards. And how much more comfortable they were with talking with a chatbot. They say, I feel more at ease exploring ideas without fear of judgment. It's more like a conversation, less like performance. I don't feel judged at all, especially if I don't know or understand something that well. I actually have more of these because I'm so overwhelmed with all these things. It's more comfortable than the discussion board, no pressure or fear of judgment. I can ask anything without feeling shame. So that lots of things that are contributing to their greater comfort having a conversation with the AI than they had posting in front of all friends. So I would give this an A. Sociality, this is, I think, probably the biggest sticking point here is, especially if you think of sociality as essentially involving other humans, there isn't another human that they're directly interacting with. The ways in which your interactions with a chatbot kind of mimic interactions with humans, so maybe it adds a little bit to sociality. So I'll go ahead and give this one a gentleman's D, but it isn't developing sociality with others, that's for sure. And developing technical proficiency, I think they are learning to have conversations with chatbots, which for better or worse is what their careers are going to be like. This is what the future is going to have. This way of doing it, I think, is developing a bit more proficiency than it would have had the way they have been doing things on my online discussion. So let me go ahead and draw attention to a couple of aspects of this new report card that we have. First off, sociality, that's just if you're hoping for them to have lots of interactions with each other and have social learning experiences with other students, that's one thing that I'm definitely giving up here. Though honestly, I was getting a C- for it before anyway, that it wasn't all that of the social activity anyway. So I haven't lost that much from at least the way my assignments had worked. Another one is accuracy. I think this will improve. It's not quite there yet. Sometimes the chatbot does give inaccurate responses that I wish it wouldn't have given. I've tried to tune using what the levers are available to me to get it to give somewhat better responses. A whole lot of the work in developing chatbots like this is giving it a big knowledge base of material directly relevant to the class and spelling out the answers that I want it to give to questions when I notice it not giving the right answers to them. But it's not perfect. But still, if the bar is low, if I need it to be better than talking with other students about the material, I think I get over that low bar, but it's definitely not as good a responses as they would get from me or from like a graduate teaching assistant. So it's all right, but there's definitely room for improvement here. And then I have colleagues who think the sort of proficiencies that I'm helping my students is basically making them more proficient at cheating, that I'm giving them a chatbot that's really good at writing about my class in particular, and making it a whole lot easier for them to turn to a chatbot to do philosophy assignments, especially assignments directly relevant to my class. And so you might question whether or not the sorts of proficiencies that I'm helping the students to develop are the sorts of proficiencies we really want students to be developing. I think overall, I reconciled myself to the fact that this is the future. Students can develop the skills to use chatbots responsibly, and trying to bury our heads in the sands and say, no, we're don't touch them, don't do it. That doesn't seem like a plausible path forward to me. And so I would rather have them using a chatbot that actually does a good job of talking about our material rather than just using some random. So overall, if you look at things, I think my report card here is a lot better than it was. So I've been pretty happy shifting to this sort of assignment. You might question whether I should just give up on this sort of assignment entirely, but at least if I'm going to continue with assignments like this, I think having them talk with a custom chatbot, at least for me, has been working out better than having them talk with each other on an online discussion board. But I'll turn this over to you all for discussion.
Anybody has any questions? We have a microphone here.
So on the question of sociality, there's I think a connection strongly for students between their level of competence with the ideas and their ability or willingness to communicate about those ideas in front of those students. Do you find, or do you get an opportunity in your course? I don't know, an opportunity to see them learn in class, go home, learn with the chatbot, and then come back to class? Are they more confident entering discussions with one another? Like, is it preparing them better to be confident entering these discussions with one another in class, or what's going on there?
Like, I don't have enough data to get causality on ways in which some of them open up as the course goes by, and whether I can pin that on the chatbot rather than just getting more familiar with the class or something like that. We hope that having talked about the material before I got some of their burning questions that they were there to ask in front of everybody else, sorted out, maybe helps to get them out of their shells. I definitely, one of the reasons I like the online discussion board assignments before is I have students who are shy about speaking in front of the class who are willing to come out of their shells, discussing on the discussion board, or at least used to be. And so I'm hoping that this gives those students more of an opportunity to ask questions that they would have been shy about asking.
Cool. A brief follow-up question. Have you considered making a stupid chatbot so that they can talk to the smart chatbot and they can also talk to the stupid chatbot who's wrong? So that when they're talking to the smart chatbot, they're sort of receivers of information. And then when they talk to the stupid chatbot, they can practice correcting people who are wrong. And I don't know.
As part of like trying to create a smart chatbot, it is sometimes stupid. So it gives them
I'm curious if you can speak about your like development time, prep time in terms of like preparing online discussion boards versus an online chatbot.
Well, on discussion boards, I ended up spending like 3 to 4 hours at the end of each discussion board that is responding to the posts. So that's each semester. Like do that way. I spend that time. For me, learning how to do the chatbot construction initially took close to that amount of time. I think they sort of did the basics of how to create a chatbot, and then you need to create a knowledge base, which basically requires having in text form any of the material that you want it to know specifically about your class, not just use the general knowledge base that that's what having read the entirety of the internet. And so that required I have lots of classes where I had PowerPoints that didn't go into very much detail, and chatbots fill in the blanks in PowerPoints not the way that I want. I had to rewrite as prose, which is the direction I've been going with thinking anyway, is trying to give them my notes written out in sentences for the course content. I didn't have such notes for all the content, and so that was one of the real investments that I need to do, is to take things that I have for students in other formats, like PowerPoint, and rewrite it in prose, because that's what the chatbot does best. So that was the most time-consuming part for me. I'd have to tune the instructions for the chatbot, trying to get it the right sort of helpful TA sort of code. But once I got that done, one chatbot, it carries over pretty well for others, and probably you would find if you just copy instructions and stuff. So longer session if you want this. You just copied those instructions, that would probably get you in the right ballpark for having a chatbot that would do well, and then you need to get the knowledge base of content for your course.
So one more question over there.
So I was just wondering if you noticed a difference in the quality of the questions that the students were asking, because sometimes when you do these discussion boards, you get questions like, what % of the grade is this worth? And questions that could be answered by the syllabus. So
The chatbot that I gave them free over the course of the semester, this was a summer class. And the first one just was trained to talk about course content. And then after that, I got enough feedback from students that they were asking some of these questions that really the syllabus was the right place to go to answer. And so for the later chatbots, I also gave it in its knowledge base the syllabus, and then I discovered that it would fill in details that I hadn't explicitly stated. It would hallucinate answers to those that were not the answers I would actually give. And so that forced me to rewrite a lot of policies much more explicitly than I usually have. It's probably a good idea anyway, just because it would fill in details in the way that statistically is common, but wasn't the way that I would necessarily do things. And so I had to become more explicit to get the chatbot to do a good job of answering questions that would really go to the syllabus sort of questions.